Everyone, my name is Kendrick LaFleur, and I am a therapist here at Blomquist Hale. And I know that I've only seen a few of these presentations done. I've not done one like this before. As I was finishing it up last night, realized that perhaps maybe I could recommend I do a seminar on procrastination, as I barely finished it just this morning. But it'll be interesting as we go through this. I usually do some of this stuff with a couple in front of me. I do a lot of couples counseling here at Blomquist Hale, and it's one of my favorite things to do. It's very challenging work, but it's very rewarding as well. And one of the things I've learned in that work is the benefits that come from the research from Dr. John Gottman. So today, oh, why does it not switch slides? Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do it this way. So today we're going to talk about communication styles, and specifically one that comes from Dr. John Gottman. And initially we're going to talk a little bit about him and his research just briefly. And then we'll go into what he calls his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. These are 4 communication behaviors that folks will do. And he gives it that title to kind of suggest that doom and gloom. When they are present, it creates havoc on a relationship. And then in his research, he's witnessed effective communications, and he calls that antidotes to the horsemen. And so we'll be reviewing those as well. And then I'll share just briefly a little introduction to Gottman's book, where most of this information that I'm sharing today comes from. The book is called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. It is a book that I would describe as designed to be a self-help book. This is not necessarily a book that is required to be worked on with a therapist. I do involve this book in my couples work and have found it to be very rewarding, but it's kind of like the home base that I use. We don't actually go through the book in session with my couples, but it's been helpful. Many of my couples have told me it's very helpful, like it is with a lot of self-help books, to have some accountability. Many of us will start something with good intentions and then peter out a little bit, which is fairly normal. And so having someone like me to kind of remind them, hey, where are we at, and set goals, has helped folks really benefit from using that book in their efforts to improve their marriage. And then the last thing I want to share is there'll be a slide about our relationship workshop. Our own Natalie Peacock, another licensed clinical social worker that we have on staff here, teaches this and has been doing for quite a while. I want to make sure I announce that at the very end. So here we go. Dr. Gottman. Dr. John Gottman is one of my heroes, and is an American psychological researcher and clinician. He's been doing it for 4 decades with a focus on marital stability and divorce prediction. He actually became quite famous by saying, and you'll see this in the video that we'll watch, is if there's any chance that if you could notice if your mic is on, if you could mute it, because we're hearing a lot of feedback.
I'll load something too.
Anyways, I'm going to keep going. So one of the things that he became famous for saying is he could spend just a few moments with a couple and with over 90% accuracy be able to determine if that couple's going to make it or not. And it's a pretty bold statement, but he has the evidence and the research to prove it. And a lot of this work that he did comes from his work, what he's affectionately called the Love Lab, which is in Seattle, Washington, where he'd invite couples to come and stay in an apartment setting for the weekend, and they would be monitored both with video and connected to mics, and also hooked up to biofeedback machines. And those biofeedback machines would be measuring heart rates and other things, so that in key moments of, which might seem very subtle to most of us as we watch, or even boring, he's been able to determine some of those little subtle moments were significant in helping identify the success in a relationship. And then just wanted to point out there that in 2007, Gottman was recognized as one of the 10 most influential therapists in the past quarter century. So what I'm going to share with you right now is a video that the Gottman Institute has published on the 4 horsemen. And it's very short, but it's super informative. And what I found in my work with couples, it's been helpful to first watch the video, but then we go through each horseman together individually. And I wish that we could offer that opportunity to just feedback back and forth, but in this scenario, it's really challenging to have, mics turned on and off and on and off. So we've decided, if you have any questions or concerns or wondering, just text it in the comments there on the chat room, and then Heather will bring those questions to us at the end. So here we go. We're going to try this with the video. Hopefully, if you can't hear anything, if somebody would wave to me and so I can make sure it's working well. I'm going to turn it.
Yeah.
And here we go.
Oh, it says, Scott, please mute
So
the mic.
selfish. What an idiot. It's not my fault we're always late. Forget it. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So, what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following 4 research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first 3 horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the 4 horsemen by visiting our site.
Okay, I've switched back on my mic. I hope you all can, I switched back my mic, and so now you can hear me instead of the video. I hope that came through all right. I don't want to watch it again. Here we go. Okay, so let's go through each one of the horsemen together in a little bit more detail. And I'll add this. I have a tendency to offer some self-disclosure. I maybe share a little bit more perhaps than some other therapists. Some of it will be about me personally, and some of it will be about me and my relationship with my wife. We've been married now for 29 years, and we have 3 kids. My 2 boys are in their mid-20s, and then I have a 14-year-old still at home. And I have a grandson, so I'm a grandpa. So I do share a little bit more than others. I will say this, I was just bringing it up again with my wife because when I'm with couples, she's told me it's okay to share some self-disclosure there. But today I said, is it all right if I do that in the presentation? And she said, absolutely, just don't make me sound like I'm a jerk. And I'm like, okay, no problem. That's not hard, you're not a jerk. But criticism is the first horseman that was introduced. It's a verbal attack on and it can often feel as though an attack on a partner's character or personality. The tone and choice of words can really be impactful, and sometimes we're not necessarily aware that our tone and the choice of words is creating harm in the relationship. And so we'll often say, you do this, or you need to stop doing that, and what is wrong with you? And these kinds of things will have our partner feel as if they're being attacked. And interestingly, what I've found is when we can eliminate that you part of it, and you'll see in the antidote, when it's not all about you do this, you do that, we're able to make some real gains and get to a place where we can talk and negotiate. What I've discovered, I think, with criticism is it's not about, or it's not intended to be about, it can sometimes be, but it's usually not about the person's personality or character. It's actually more about there's a behavior that I would like changed. There's something I would want different, whether things that you are doing as my partner or things that I'm doing that I'd like to do or do differently, or something that I think would benefit our relationship. But our way of bringing that out often comes out as criticism, which then causes our partner to not respond in a very favorable way either. So the antidote to criticism is basically a 3-step process. And the first step was not introduced in that video. So we're going to talk about that right now. The first step is what Gottman calls in his book, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, the soft startup. You'll often see it sometimes called the gentle startup, but the way I was first introduced to it was the soft startup. The soft startup is essentially sharing with your partner something that you genuinely care and appreciate about. And I've learned some extras in my own personal experience with the soft startup. When I want to share something with my partner, I found that it's best if, one, the thing I'm sharing is true, not making this up. When I tell you I really feel good about this, or I'm grateful for what you did for me about that, if it's true, it's very impactful and helpful. When it's not true, our partner can usually sense that. And certainly, it's never helpful to introduce lying in an intimate relationship. So make sure what you're saying and sharing to them is true in your soft startup. The second is it's best when it's something that's recent. So for example, what I think is one of the best soft startups is when something just recently happened or is happening right now, to share that with them. And not always in the intention to share the last part of this antidote is I have a positive need. I have a need that I would like to have, a behavior that I'd like to have changed. So I'm going to share something with you just because. So maybe I really like the way you look in those jeans, or, hey, I love your haircut. It looks great. It accentuates your eyes. Or you might say, hey, I got home and I know tonight was my day to cook. You cleaned the kitchen and it made cooking so much more enjoyable for me. Thank you for doing that. Those recent wonderful moments that happen within a relationship, when brought up in the moment or recently, really has a strong impact. And then I've also learned to be specific in the soft startup and not too generic. Some of the weaker soft startups I've heard of is like, oh, I love you so much, or, oh, you're so pretty, oh, you're so handsome. And those things may be very true. And I'm not trying to suggest that they're not, but when it's broad and kind of plain, it's not as impactful and supportive as if it can be specific and recent. So once we've done the soft startup, once we've shared with our partner something that we genuinely appreciate about, the second step is to share your experience using I statements and involving your feelings. I've had a lot of people tell me that they've heard this before, and I don't know where it necessarily originated, but where I'm seeing it, it's coming from Gottman's research. He's seen couples who have been very successful in their communicating and getting along, and a big part of that was being able to share their experience with their partner rather than kind of attacking their partner. And this is the key part, is like, when I'm sharing this part of it in the antidote for criticism, I'm keeping it on me. I'm sharing my experience from my perspective, and I'm involving what my feelings are like. Oftentimes, in loving relationships, when we hear our partner is struggling in some way, we want to respond to that. We want to help. And so this is one of the reasons why I think this is very effective. When there's a behavior that needs to be changed, rather than attacking my partner, I will share with my partner what it's like for me and how it's challenging, and then how I could use some help. And that, therein, is what step 3, expressing your positive need, sharing the behavior that I'd like different, or or sometimes I might not even necessarily know exactly what I would like different, but if I've done steps 1 and 2 well, step 3 will now be more of a negotiation or an exploring together with my partner of what could happen or what we'd like to have happen together, rather than where they might feel I'm attacking them because there's something going on that I'm not happy about. And so expressing positive need is step 3. Whoop, we got to get going. We're running out of time. I know the video introduced the next Horsemen as Contempt. I like to go to Defensiveness next. And the reason being is that typically when someone mishandles criticism, when it goes the Horseman route instead of the Antidote route, our partner will get defensive. And so this is a self-disclosure. I don't know if while you were watching the video, if you were able to kind of imagine, okay, which one of these horsemen do I do? And many of us will do like one in particular or one more often, but most of us, I think, do a little bit of all. Defensiveness is mine. I tend to get defensive. It involves self-protection. There's some righteous indignation. It often is an attack back where we're blaming our partner. And we're saying things like, well, I'm not the problem, you're the problem. Sometimes we'll be playing the victim, as it mentioned in the video. And that's not helpful in a discussion. That's really where it can lead to an argument. And then the thing I hear the most is you do it too. Where I hear defensiveness the most is sometimes it'll be like, hey, you're always on your phone. I'm trying to tell you something and you're always just staring at your phone. And when I see that in my office, the partner almost invariably always answers, will you do it too? And that may be very true. But in a situation where we're trying to come to some understanding with one another, be kind to one another, or accomplish something like finding out what we would like different, accusing back, you do it too, never goes well. So the antidote to defensiveness of this horseman is to take ownership. And I've learned some things about taking ownership over, as I mentioned, this is my go-to. One of the things is to only admit to things that you actually did do. What I've seen sometimes is people will play the martyr, and I've seen folks say, I'm sure it was me, so whatever it was, I'll take blame for it. Can we please move on? What I think people are doing when they say that is, I'm uncomfortable, I really don't want to fight. So if you're just looking for someone to blame, I'm happy to take the blame. I just don't want to have this argument. I want to get back to whatever I was doing or get back to where we were all getting along and being happy. The challenge with that is, though, what's happening when we play that card is our partner will feel invalidated. They will feel as though what they have to say or what is important to them is not important to you. And playing the martyr it doesn't get us anywhere. So another extra I've learned about taking ownership is sharing no excuses. So for example, I was one time in an argument with my partner, and I got upset, and I used a tone and words that I'm not proud of, but it happened. I said some things that were not very nice. And when we came to a place where we started to repair, and I admitted, I apologize. I used a tone and words that were not kind, and I apologize for that. My normal response would also to add in some excuses for that. Like, I was very tired, or I would say, I love you. I wasn't my intention. I never meant to hurt you. Those may be true, but when we pepper our taking ownership of some poor behavior with excuses, it minimizes our effort to admit, hey, I did this thing. I'm not proud of it, but I did this thing. But I love you. I never meant to hurt you. That just weakens the whole thing. So I have learned, and it's very uncomfortable for me to sit in that, to say, this is what I did. I'm very sorry for that. I regret doing it. I'm going to try harder not to do it again, which comes up to the last part of this antidote, is to offer an apology, and where possible, if it works, maybe a commitment to I'll do better next time is really helpful. This is hard for me, but I've learned if I sit in that uncomfortableness when taking ownership, it kills the fuel for the fire that's going on. So for example, in that scenario where I said to my wife, hey, I'm really sorry for what I did, that was rude, and I apologize. Her response was, you totally did. You were so mean. I can't even believe you said those things. Now, normally I would want to say, yeah, but I was really tired, or you don't understand how hard it is, or I'm under a lot of stress. I didn't this time, and it went beautifully. What I did was, you're right. You're right. I do regret it. I'm so sorry. I wish I hadn't said those things. I sat in that. I kept taking ownership, and it did not take long for her to respond and go, thank you for admitting that. I appreciate that. That makes me feel a lot better knowing that you're admitting that of your poor behavior. It's not easy to do. It takes practice. And maybe I'm emphasizing this because, like I said, this has been my go-to for years. And I've learned some real benefits by taking ownership for what I do, not what I don't do, share no excuses, and then offer an apology and, where possible, a commitment to do better. The next one is stonewalling. Stonewalling, in Gottman's research, he says more men do than women, and I'm not going to argue with his research. In my anecdotal reporting with my couples, it's been more 50-50. And what stonewalling is, just a reminder, is shutting down or withdrawing. So we're having an argument, it gets pretty intense, and I might say, go away, I don't want to talk to you, or you know what, I'm out of here, I don't need to put up with this. And so we might emotionally stonewall, where I don't give, I just shut down. We might verbally stonewall, I'm not talking to you, I'm not going to talk to you for several days. Some people will do that. Or physically, I'm out of here and leave the house or leave for a few days. Sometimes that happens too. Stonewalling, in the video, he mentions it's very damaging and hurtful, but what I have learned, and this is, again, a little bit of self-disclosure, my wife is a stonewaller. She tends to want to stonewall, and I hated it. I've always hated it. She will shut me out, or she'll say, go away, I'm upset, leave me alone. It took a while till I learned why she would stonewall. One of the reasons she shared with me why she stonewalls is because she wants to avoid the conflict. It's very heated, and she's uncomfortable and often flooded with emotion. It's also, though, sometimes used to express disapproval, create distance, but also her second reason is she wants to avoid the argument to get bigger and nastier. And she'll say, when we're arguing and it gets pretty intense and you're demanding some kind of answer or result from me, and I can't give it, I'm flooded with emotion, you're telling me how do I feel? I don't know how I feel. I'm feeling everything. You got to go, leave me alone. Now that I understand those reasons, it made it easier for me to participate in the antidote for stonewalling. The antidote for stonewalling, interestingly enough, is to take a break initially. That's the first part of it. But there's a lot more that's really important. Taking a break can really help. Now, I know some folks, and I'm one of them, it's uncomfortable to take a break. I'm one of those folks that if we've got a problem, I want to keep talking about it, let's try to keep finding out what the solution is. Maybe if we keep talking, we'll come to a conclusion. Interestingly, though, for someone who's a natural stonewaller, that kind of pressure makes things even worse. Taking a break can do amazing work for an individual, but there's some extras that Gottman found in his research that makes the break more effective. So taking a break, but agree on when we'll come back. Agree that this is too much right now. I need a break. Maybe come back in about 20 minutes. And the video recommended 20 minutes. Sometimes that break's going to be longer because, hey, I got to go to work. I'm not going to see you for 8 hours, but that's the way it is. That's okay too. Sometimes it's like, it's late at night. We both got work in the morning. You've heard the old adage, never go to bed angry. I don't believe in that at all. I think when we stay up and keep fighting, it gets into the wee hours of the morning. The fights tend to get nastier and meaner. Sometimes, and exactly what the research shows, taking a break can be very helpful. But the reasons why and how we manage it is what's important. Let's take a break because it's too intense. Let's agree to come back, and let's agree upon when that time will be. And then during that break, what you do is very important. We're not spending that break gearing up for round two. We're taking that break so that we can be prepared to talk more openly and hopefully come to some conclusions of what started the argument to begin with. So in that break, you want to take care of yourself. You want to do self-soothing activities or distracting activities, things that help you get yourself into a good space. So for a lot of people, it's a lot of different things. Some folks benefit from going for a run or going to the gym. Some taking a shower or bath. Some doing a meditation, reading a book, watching a video, listening to their favorite music. meditate. I recommend the individuals discover what works good for you, what helps ground you, what helps you put in a good space. So when you're taking that, agreed upon break, when we come back, oh, I feel so much better. Thank you for giving me that time. I think I'm ready to discuss what you wanted to talk about. I've seen it work in my own marriage. It's been wonderful. I hate stonewalling, and yet I love it because I know that if we take this break and if we do it right, when we come back, it's going to go way, way better. The last one, and the reason why I share this last, is contempt. Now, you remember in the video and in Gottman's research, he shares that this is the most damaging horseman of the four. Contempt, unlike the other ones, the antidote is different. The first three that we talked about had a reaction that we can do in the moment. I could be beginning to criticize and recognize, oh, I can see from my partner's response this isn't going well. I can change gears and say, you know what, can I start again? Let me tell you something that I really appreciate about you. Start with soft startup. Then I express, instead of attacking my partner, I'll share my experience and then express what I need different. You can change these things in the moment. Contempt doesn't work quite that way. Contempt comes from a sense of superiority. The intentions are to insult or be abusive. And you remember in the video, it mentioned several of them: eye rolling, sarcasm, name calling, mockery, and hostile humor. These are different ways people will express contempt. My sense is one of the things that happens when we argue and then stonewall without an agreement to come back and then discuss, that becomes fuel for contempt. That breeds contempt. When I had a problem and I want to talk about it and you shut me down and maybe secretly hope if we ignore it, it'll just go away. Maybe when we just ignore it, when you come back, we can be kind again and just not worry about that issue you were bringing up. I'm going to feel as though I wasn't heard, I wasn't validated. You don't really value what I think is important. And so now I have contempt for you for that. And contempt often resides in our brain. Sometimes we're not always sharing with our partner what we're thinking, and when we're thinking negative thoughts, but in our head, we're often sometimes thinking negative thoughts about our partner. And in Gottman's research, he's found that, and you'll see that when we talk a little bit more about the principles in his book, that one of the best ways to combat contempt, the antidote, is to foster a relationship of mutual respect and admiration. I think this is a quote directly from his book. This doesn't happen overnight. This is not a behavior that we can just adjust ourselves in the moment. This requires an environment that is consistently and regularly being worked on, whether it's in the partnership back and forth, or even in my own mind and how I perceive and view my partner. Gottman's research shows that when we fuel ourselves with negativity in the relationship, it creates problems, and it's harder to get through discussions or approach needs that people have within the relationship because there's now contempt. And so this is probably the worst of the four horsemen. And I'll save it for last because it can show up in any of the other horsemen. The way we approach in our criticisms, the way we defend ourselves, there can be contempt heard in those moments. And so that's one of the things I'm watching for when I see my couples come in. And when it's there, I know it's gonna take some work. But what's really exciting, I think, and Gottman has proven through his research and others who have conducted research regarding his programs and his methods, this works. This really works. So let's get into that. And it looks like we're doing great on time. The book that I'm getting most of this, I wanted to share this real quick. I was looking over my book just before we started. This is in the book that I'm about to share with you, but about contempt. Gottman shares this, and I forgot to put it in the slide. Couples who are contemptuous of each other are more likely to suffer from infectious illnesses, colds, flus, and so on, than other people. And that's a pretty bold statement, but there's research both through his institute and others that show that. Interestingly, the research that I've read so far doesn't exactly explain to us why, but there is a strong correlation with illness. Individuals with illnesses and their relationship has high levels of contempt. So for our own very own health, it's important that we make an effort, if we recognize contempt within our relationship, on how to combat that, how to minimize that. So 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. That's the book that I just read that quote from. That's the book where I'm getting all this information from. I'm not Gottman licensed or trained, but I was introduced to Dr. Gottman's work when I was in my master's program, and I absolutely love it. I found it incredibly effective in my own marriage, and I found it effective in the couples that I've worked with. Like I said, we don't use the book directly in our therapy sessions, but it's kind of a home base to work from. And one of the things that Gottman teaches, so the beginning of the book talks about the Horsemen and the Antidotes. It also talks about his research and how he comes to this ability to be able to say, hey, I can spend just some moments with any couple and tell with over 90% accuracy whether they're going to make it or not. But then it goes into the principles that he's identified, the 7 principles for making marriage work, and how that is laid out in the book. I think is super helpful. Again, so it can be used as a self-help book. The way they've got it mapped out is as the principles is introduced and explained. The first one, know your love maps, basically how well do we know one another within the relationship. He'll explain the principle, and I'll offer some scenarios of different couples that he's worked with over the years, and even sometimes some of his own personal experiences with his own partner. And then there'll be a quiz, a 20-question quiz that both participants, both partners, will take, usually on their own. It's 20 questions, true, false. So it's really easy to do. You just, is that true? And go through it. And at the end of the quiz, if you've scored 10 or more in this area on that quiz, then this principle is probably not a weakness for you guys. If you guys score, 15 out of 20, 19 out of 20, then you're both doing quite well in this area on this principle. But with each principle, he shares exercises on how to improve that area. And so I recommend to my couples, even if they scored high in this principle, I encourage them to do at least one of the exercises. Now, most of the exercises are done as a couple, but some are done as an individual, and then there's sometimes a reporting, and then there's some that to your partner, and then there's some that you just do all on your own. And I've found that even if you scored high in a certain area, it's helpful to still do at least one of the exercises. Now, if you scored less than 10 on that 20-question quiz at the beginning of the principle for that chapter, Gottman recommends you do all the exercises. And there's usually not more than 3 or 4 per principle. So it's not terribly time-consuming or difficult. And in fact, the payment that comes out of that effort of increasing intimacy and love within the relationship, patience and kindness in the relationship, basically that what I put on here, the foster relationship, mutual respect and admiration, I think is a key point to what Gottman has discovered in his research. The more we can have a relationship that has that kind of respect, basically becoming good friends or being good friends or maintaining a good friendship over the years, is what really helps a marriage keep going and work. A bottom line, the takeaway I think I got from this book is increasing the positivity over the negativity within the relationship. We're doing great on time. So last bit, we have a workshop that we do here. It's a 5-week course. It's free to those who have Blomquist Hale as their employee assistants. And it's 5 weeks that we do it on Tuesday nights. And it's taught by our very own Natalie Peacock. She's a fabulous clinician, very skilled and gifted clinician. She's also a licensed clinical social worker, as I am. She's also incredibly funny and entertaining. So for couples who want to participate in this, it makes a great date night. It's not an environment where we're going to hash out our problems, or we'll save that for in session with a licensed therapist. And we offer that obviously, as Heather noted at the beginning, we offer that benefit as well. But this workshop is open for anyone. I recommend, if you want to try this, commit to doing all 5 weeks. Natalie's done a fabulous job of putting together a program that addresses many different issues and helps build and strengthen relationships. So the next one that's coming up is until the end of summer, August 4th through September 1st. It's Tuesday nights from 6:30 to 8:30. And you can reserve your spot, you and your partner's spot, by either calling that 801-262-9619, or you could visit our website at blomquisthale.com. So that's about all I've got for today. We went over a little bit about who Dr. John Gottman is and his research. We identified we've shared together what he has identified as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and then the antidotes, or behaviors that we can do differently that will enhance and strengthen our relationships by communicating differently. Then we talked about the 7 principles for making marriage work. And the takeaway from that I think I forgot to mention in addressing that book, sharing that book with you, is that it's not all about communication. The number one goal my couples come into when they come in for therapy is that we want to communicate better or more effectively. And that's great. That is important. That's why I wanted to share this. A lot of us are now still in self-quarantine mode. And so we're around our partner a lot more. And maybe we've discovered there's been some challenges. So communicating differently does improve and help the relationship, but there's so much more. And Gottman's research proves that by doing more, and basically by going through those 7 principles, you can improve that relationship. And then we shared that we have a relationship workshop here at Blomquist Hale, taught by our very own Natalie Peacock. And I hope you take advantage of that opportunity, because it's a very effective and useful class.